Hello and welcome. My name is Amanda, and today I wanted to share with you all an update on how I rate books. So I know it's pretty widely contested how people rate books on Goodreads, whether it's based on feeling, whether it's something like very analytical, and I fall into the category of kind of more of an analytical rating. I have a hard time just rating based off feeling alone, because I guess I don't really necessarily feel like a strong emotional connection to books for very long after I read them. I might like after I finish a book initially, and then after time it'll just kind of fade a little because I do consume a lot of books, and there aren't very many books that like stick with me for a long time. So for me, I have to be quite a bit more analytical in my rating for it to be consistent and make sense. I did pull a lot of inspiration from my rating system based off of G over at Book Roast. And I think maybe two and a half years ago, she did an update of her system, which she calls C.A.W.P.I.L.E. I basically like keep my rating system, my star rating, at the same intervals as hers. I just have different categories that I rate books based off of because of what's most important to me when I'm reading. So that's mostly what I'm going to go over here with you. I don't have a fun acronym or name for my rating system. I basically just have to keep my categories in alphabetical order in order to remember them. So just quickly, I'm going to tell you the 8 categories I rate books based off of, and then we can go more in depth on what I look for within each category. So we've got atmosphere, characters, enjoyment, format, intrigue, logic, plot, and writing style. So those are the 8 things that I'm really diving into, and within those 8 things I give each of them a rating between 1 and 10, and I'll explain the math and like how that equals out to a star rating at the end. So with atmosphere, this for me is the world building of the book, or if it's not like a fantasy or sci-fi setting, just kind of the overall setting within the book. Is it built up well? Do I have a lot of description? So if it's a fantasy world, am I able to visually picture how the author wants me to picture it? Or is it a contemporary world where I can either insert myself into where the main character is, or just kind of picture like their world and how they live in it. I want dark stories to have dark settings, and I want, I guess, like lighter, fluffier stories to have more of a lighter, contemporary feeling to them. And the next is characters. And with characters, I'm looking for strong character development. I'm also looking for relationships that make sense. Whether it's like romantic relationships or friendship relationships, whether it's like parent-children relationships, anything like that. It just needs to be a relationship that actually makes sense in kind of like a real world setting, whether that's a fantasy or a contemporary story. I'm also looking for kind of a lack of tropes, or if there are tropes, I'm looking for tropes that are done well. So I'm not big on love triangles, but if there's a love triangle that's done pretty well, then I'm gonna rate the characters higher. I'm also looking for new and or authentic character dynamics, and I really like background of key characters that actually adds to the story, not just I guess is just fluff or filler. So that's what I look for with characters. And then enjoyment, this is my overall feeling of the book. So was I satisfied by the ending? Did I feel like I wasted my time when I was done reading it? Was I left wanting anything? Overall, was I mad at the book because I didn't feel like it was written well? Or was I mad because that was the intent of the author? Or was I really happy? Was I satisfied? Was I not? Basically, just overall enjoyment. That's all I'm looking for. Format can be a little tricky for me. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I feel like a lot of your like overall perception of a story can be altered if you don't like the narrator, if I guess maybe you can't understand what's being said, if you don't retain a lot if you're listening to a book. So I just want to know if it was enjoyable as a physical book, if it was enjoyable as an ebook, or if it was enjoyable as an audiobook, which are the three formats that most people read based off of. If maybe like the format of the book wasn't nice to read, and maybe just things like that. It's kind of hard to explain format. It's just kind of how I feel based on the format of the book that I pick up. The next category is intrigue, and this is really how bored or interested in the story was I while I was reading it. So I want to know if the story holds my attention. I want to know if I lost attention. Did my heart race where it was supposed to? And did I ever want to roll my eyes? Intrigue for me also is this book holding my attention enough, or like drawing me to it enough to where I like physically want to pick it up and read it? Or am I just kind of like, I don't care, when I get to it, I'll get to it, if I need to finish it by the end of the month, but, you know, I am either like reluctant to continue reading or what, which I guess for me, this is a side note, I should probably be better about DNFing books that I'm not drawn towards reading, but I'm also a completionist, so especially for series, so if I need to read a book to get to the next book, I'm gonna slog through it. But intrigue is definitely there for, do I even want to be reading this book or not? The next category that I have is logic, and I want to know about the overall logic of the story, or whether the events happen in a logical way. So it's, I guess for an example like fantasy, I don't need to go in depth on how the magic system works, as long as I get enough information to where it's logical. It's not just all wimbly nimbly, hocus pocus, or whatever you want. Whether logic in like a contemporary story makes sense. I mean, if you have kids flying all over Europe to, I don't know, chase down this thing to get their love interest to like fall in love with them, it's not logical, because a lot of people don't have the means to fly all over Europe. So logic is just, does it make sense or not? Next we have plot. So what I'm looking for is an intriguing storyline. I'm looking for plot holes or unanswered questions, a plot structure that makes sense, and then key information that's presented in a logical way. I'm not good with gray area. I don't like things that are left open to interpretation. I really like the black and white, like, give me everything I need in order to form the conclusion that the author wants me to form. I hate when stories are left open to interpretation, which is funny because my fiance Skylar, that's one thing, like with movies, he loves is the movies where you have to read between the lines and it's an open ending for you to form your own ideas and opinions, and I hate it so much. So I want a plot that's well-rounded, not a redundant plot that I have been exposed to multiple times, and just a plot that's done well, a plot that's engaging and holds me until the end. And then the last category I have is writing style. So I'm looking for sentence structure that flows, unique word choice, but not so much to where it's difficult to read because the author is picking words that aren't used in like everyday jargon. So you're sitting there like, okay, I know what that word reads or what that word means, but as I'm reading it, it just doesn't like settle well in your mind. I'm also looking for the right amount of description, so not too much, not too little, and then page or chapter formatting that makes sense. So same with like page breaks and things like that. I'm really looking for it to looking for those sorts of things. So I like when it makes sense. Writing style that's like light and fluffy and whimsical. And I also like writing style that is like direct and to the point when it makes sense. One author whose writing style I really, really struggle with is Gregory Maguire, because I feel like the way he constructs his sentences is just not how anybody would talk ever. And his like word choice too is just like, it's so pretentious sounding, and it's so difficult to get through because it makes his sentences so dense. But anyway, this isn't anything for Gregory Maguire. So how I then calculate my star rating. Like I said, give each book I read, I will rate each of those 8 categories a number between 1 and 10. And then I add up all of those numbers and divide by 8 to get an average. So what that gives me is a scale. So for my rating scale, a 0-star rating, which doesn't happen hardly ever. I've never had a 0-star rating, but this is a 0 to a 1.6. A 1-star rating is a 1.7 to a 3.3. A 2-star rating is a 3.4 to a 5.0. A 3-star rating is a 5.1 to a 6.7. A 4-star rating is a 6.8 to an 8.4. And a 5-star rating is an 8.5 to a 10. Obviously with this, it's really hard to score either a 4 or 5-star rating, especially a 5-star rating. And most of my books end up turning out to be a 3-star rating, which I feel like lines up pretty well with kind of how I would rate a book just based off of feeling. But if we quickly want to run through a book that I rated recently, I do have a book here called The Greatcoat by Helen Dunmore, which I actually have right next to me, right here. So for atmosphere, I gave this book an 8-star rating. It was kind of a ghost story feeling, set right after World War II in England. And it was set during the winter, and the author had a way of describing the atmosphere in such a chilling way that I felt cold as the main character felt cold. So I felt like her description was really good in that it made me feel like I was in the place of the main character. I felt like maybe there could have been a bit more description so that I could picture the surroundings and settings a bit more. So I don't usually rate things like a full 10-star. So 8 is a really good rating for me with this. For basically just how the atmosphere is. For characters, I gave them a 7-star rating. I gave them a 7 out of 10. And I felt like the character relationships for the most part made sense. You have the main character, Isabel, and her husband, Philip, who have known each other for a very short amount of time. They've only been married for 2 months. This takes place in the 1952. So like I said, right after World War II. So you're still getting married super young into people you don't know very well. You're still trying to build those relationships and learn about the person that you're living with. And I felt that within this. And there's also a ghost character, without spoiling too much, that I feel like had a really interesting character dynamic. It almost left a kind of love triangle, but not really. Though I do feel like maybe Isabel's interactions with Alec could have been a bit different because it was a lot of kind of doing and saying things that would please him versus what I feel like a person would normally do. For the enjoyment, overall I gave it a 7-star rating. There were times when it slogged a little, and there were times when I felt like things were wrapped up maybe a bit too much. So just a 7-star rating, 7 point out of 10 rating for that. For format, I gave this a 6. I, for the most part, liked how it was laid out in the book and how chapters and things like that were broken up. I didn't think there was anything exceptional about it though, so that's why I kind of got like a middle of the road 6 out of 10. For Intrigue, I gave this a 7 because this book really did make me want to continue reading it. But also I was trying to read it and finish it for a prompt for readathon I was participating in. So I might have enjoyed more maybe if in bed I was scrolling through Facebook versus reading this book. But when I did pick it up and read it, I was flying through this. For logic, I gave it a 6 because, I mean, it is a paranormal story. It was hard to understand like how this apparition came to be, and there really wasn't explanation on that, so I would have liked a bit more of that, I guess. So for me, logic wise, it just didn't really add up a lot. For plot, I gave it a 7 because I thought it was pretty new and interesting for me, at least. The plot clipped along at a decent pace, and it didn't leave too many unanswered questions. And then for writing style, I gave it a 5. There wasn't anything like super special about this, like I mentioned earlier with one of the categories. It just kind of was to the point. So with all of those added up, I don't have the total added up right now. I can do that really quickly. We have 8 plus 7, 7, 6, 7, 7, 6, 7, 6, 7, 5. Okay, so that's a total of 53 divided by 8 gives us 6.625. So actually, I think I updated this on my spreadsheet. I did score things a little higher. So a 6.625 would be, for me, I don't necessarily round up, even though I know like a 6.6 would actually be a 6. No, it would be a 6.6, sorry. So this would, within the rating that I gave you, would be a 3-star rating, but I did bump it up because for me this was a 4-star rating, so I bumped up one of the categories or 2 of the categories, I don't remember what they were, to give it a 6.8 star rating, or 6.8 on the scale, which makes it a 4-star rating. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight on how I rate books. Like I said, it's very analytical, and for me that works really well. There's no half stars in it, so it lines up perfectly with Goodreads, like 0 to 5-star rating, and for me that works really well. I think if you have half stars personally, that's almost too much. And I'm good with just rating books up to 5 stars. So I would love to know how you rate books. If you rate similar, if you rate based off feeling alone. I think it's really interesting to find out how people rate books. And I would also love to know if maybe this helps you in any way. Try to figure out like how you want to rate books in the future. So please do let me know down in the comments below, and I will chat with you there until my next video. Bye!